There was once a village so dry that even the air seemed to thirst. The sun hung like a hammer above cracked earth, beating down on huts made of dust and straw. In that village lived a young girl named Abony, whose name once meant, "We asked and she was given." But lately, it felt as though the world had taken her back. Her father had died seasons ago, leaving behind a widow whose heart grew hard and hollow. The new stepmother, Mama Duro, believed that hunger was a punishment sent to test her power, and she would rather starve another than go without herself. Her two daughters followed her example, their laughter sharp as knives, their bowls always full while Abony stayed empty. Each morning, when the village gathered for the day's meal, Abony sat quietly by the corner fire. Her hands cupped around a bowl that held only steam. When she reached for bread, Mama Duro's slap came faster than speech. "Only those who earn food may eat it," the woman would hiss. "And what have you earned, girl of nothing?" Abony would lower her gaze. "I swept the yard. I fetched the water." Her stepmother's lips would twist. "Water? The gods themselves cannot fetch water when the sky refuses. You will work harder tomorrow, or you will go hungry again." Outside the fields were ghosts. Once golden with millet and maize, now they lay dead under the cruel sun. Dust coiled in the wind like smoke from a dying fire. The people prayed to Olu Oren, god of the sky, and to Ani, mother of the earth, but no answer came. By the third moon of drought, the village had become a place of suspicion. Neighbors accused neighbors of hiding grain, of stealing rain. And Mama Duro whispered to anyone who would listen that her husband's orphan child carried bad luck in her shadow, that wherever she walked, crops withered. One night, when even the crickets had fallen silent, the stepmother made her decision. She woke Abony before dawn, her face a dark shape against the faint blue of the sky. "Take this basket," she ordered. "Go to the farthest field and wait there until you find food. Do not return until the earth feeds you." Abony blinked in confusion. "But, Mama, there is nothing there." "Then starve with the soil that loves you so much," the woman snapped, thrusting the empty basket into her arms. Her stepsisters giggled behind her, one whispering, "Maybe the ants will feed her crumbs." They pushed her out into the cold dawn, closing the door before she could speak again. Abony stood alone at the edge of the village, barefoot on cracked clay. The horizon burned faintly with light, but the world felt colder than it ever had. Around her, the wind stirred and sighed through the hollow fields. She looked down at the empty basket, woven from reeds her mother once gathered with laughter. She remembered the songs her mother used to sing while harvesting, how she would thank the earth for every handful of grain. Tears burned Abony's eyes. "Mother," she whispered, "you told me the earth remembers kindness. But what if it has forgotten me?" A warm breeze brushed her cheek then, soft as a palm. The grass around her seemed to shiver, though there was no life left in it. She took her first step into the dying field. Behind her, the door of the hut stayed shut. Before her, the empty land stretched like forever. And though her stomach clenched and her throat burned, something in her heart whispered that this was not the end, but the beginning of a promise only the earth could keep. By midday the sun was no longer a light, it was a punishment. Its heat pressed down on Abony's shoulders until her body trembled. The ground burned beneath her bare feet. The basket she carried felt heavier with every step, though it held nothing but air. Around her, the field stretched endlessly. Once it had been the pride of the village, waves of corn that sang when the wind passed through, stalks so tall they whispered secrets to the clouds. But now it was a graveyard. Blackened husks stood like bones, and the soil crumbled between her toes like ash. She moved slowly, whispering old songs under her breath, fragments her mother had sung before the sickness took her. The rhythm kept her steady. Earth below, give and take. Feed the seed for mercy's sake. Sky above, in thunder's call. Hear our hunger, heal us all. Her voice cracked at the last line. There was no one to hear her but the crows. By evening her body was weak. Her lips were cracked and dry, her stomach aching as though it had turned on itself. She sank to her knees beside a dead row of maize. "Please," she murmured to the soil, pressing her palms into it. "Please don't let me die like this." Her fingers scraped against something hard. She dug a little and found a shriveled kernel, small and lifeless. She held it close to her chest as though it were a heart still beating. "Just one," she whispered. "Just one and I could live." She looked toward the sky, pale, empty, pitiless. Then, faintly, she thought she heard it, a low hum, deep and patient, like someone breathing under the ground. The sound made her still. She pressed her ear to the soil. It wasn't the wind. It was movement. The earth trembled, just enough to make the dust rise around her. She pulled back, frightened, but curiosity held her. The hum became a sigh, and the sigh became a whisper. She couldn't understand the words, but the tone was familiar, ancient, comforting. She closed her eyes. Mother? No answer, but the soil beneath her hand warmed. When she opened her eyes again, something had changed. The horizon no longer shimmered with heat. The light dimmed as a shadow passed over the sun, a cloud, drifting where no cloud had been for weeks. Ebony lifted her face toward it. A drop of water landed on her cheek. Rain. It came softly at first, falling in thin silver threads, then heavier, until the air was filled with the smell of dust and new life. Ebony laughed weakly, tilting her head back to drink from the sky. The ground darkened around her, soaking in the blessing. And then, before her eyes, the blackened stalks began to move. At first she thought it was the wind again. But no, they were growing. Green spread like ink across parchment. Stems straightened, leaves unfurled, and ears of corn swelled and ripened before her eyes. The whole field came alive, whispering with the sound of life reborn. Ebony stumbled back, clutching her basket. Her heart pounded in disbelief. The field, dead only moments ago, now shimmered with color. She reached out, her trembling fingers brushing against a stalk. It bent toward her as if bowing. Another followed. Then another. Within moments, the entire field seemed to lean in her direction, thousands of green heads dipping low in silent reverence. Ebony fell to her knees, tears mixing with rain. What are you doing?" she whispered. The corn rustled in reply, and from the wind came a voice, not words but meaning. "You were kind when others were cruel. You gave thanks when others cursed. Now the earth remembers." Her body shook as she began to weep. The crops around her swayed in rhythm with her heartbeat. She reached out and plucked one cob, still warm from the rain, peeled back the husk and bit into it. The taste was unlike anything she had ever known, sweet, alive, and golden as dawn. And as she ate, the world around her bloomed. Flowers rose from the cracks, vines curled around her arms like bracelets, and the once dead field became a living kingdom of green. The rain softened. The clouds opened. And for the first time in her life, Ebony was not hungry, not for food, not for love, not for hope. Because in that moment she understood, the earth itself had chosen her. By dawn, the village had already gathered at the edge of the field. Word had traveled faster than the rain. No one had slept. The storm that came in the night had been loud and sudden, pounding on rooftops that had long forgotten the sound of water. People came running with baskets, cups, even hollowed gourds to catch it, weeping as it soaked their dry earth. But when the rain stopped, the real wonder began. Where the earth had once been barren and black, now stood an ocean of green. Crops stretched far beyond the eye could see, maize, cassava, millet, beans, even flowers blooming between them as though the earth could not contain its joy. And there, in the middle of it all, stood Ebony. Her hair was wet, her dress clung to her body, and her skin shone with the strange silver light of dawn. The basket beside her was full, impossibly full, with golden maize. She didn't move as the villagers approached. Her eyes were distant, as though she was still listening to something the others could not hear. "She's been here all night," whispered one woman. "Alone?" said another, clutching her shawl. "No one can stay in that field alone. That land was cursed." "But look," said an old man, stepping forward. "It's alive again." They came closer, cautious and trembling, until they stood a few paces away from her. Ebony turned to them slowly. Her eyes were calm, but deep, as though holding the storm that had passed. "You shouldn't be here," said her stepmother sharply, forcing her way through the crowd. Her fine dress was soaked, and her hair clung to her temples, but her voice was as sharp as ever. "This land belongs to the village, not to you." Ebony looked at her, not in defiance, not in fear, but in quiet understanding. "Then let the land speak for itself," she said softly. Her stepmother scoffed. "You're a fool, girl. No land speaks." At that, the wind stirred. A low ripple passed through the crops, starting at the far edge of the field and sweeping inward, a green wave that ended at Ebony's feet. The stalks bowed again all at once, bending toward her in a synchronized movement that made the villagers gasp. It was unmistakable. The field was alive. And it recognized her. The stepmother took a step back, her voice breaking. What kind of witchcraft?" "It's no witchcraft," said an elder woman. "It's grace." The others murmured in agreement, awe and fear mixing in equal measure. Some fell to their knees. Others pressed their palms together in silent prayer. The old man who had spoken first came forward again. "Child," he said, "what did you do?" Ebony hesitated. How could she explain? That the earth had whispered to her? That she had felt her mother's warmth in the soil? That hunger had been her prayer and the rain its answer? I only asked for mercy, she said simply. Her words fell like stones into the quiet air. The villagers looked at one another. Mercy. It was something they had long forgotten. In their hunger they had turned cruel, hoarding food, selling children, blaming the weak. And now, here was this girl, the one they had left to starve, standing in a sea of life that the earth itself had given her. The stepmother trembled, her face pale with fury and confusion. You think this makes you special? She hissed. The field may bow to you, but you'll still eat dirt before I ever call you daughter. Ebony said nothing. She simply turned, lifted her basket of corn and began walking toward the village. Wherever she stepped, the crops bent to clear her path. And the villagers, silent and breathless, parted for her as if she were something holy. By the time she reached the village square, the air had changed. People began following her, one by one, like pilgrims chasing a miracle. Mothers clutched their children close, old men wept openly, and those who had mocked her now bowed their heads in shame. But Ebony did not look back. She went straight to the shrine at the center of the village, a small clay hut where offerings were made to the spirits of harvest. She knelt there, placed her basket before the altar, and whispered, "Thank you." The ground beneath her pulsed once, softly, as if acknowledging her words. And from that moment, the villagers knew that hunger would never again rule their land. They did not yet understand that this miracle came with a price, that those who had shown cruelty would soon feel the earth's justice. But the wind already carried the warning, rustling through the maze like distant laughter. By the second dawn after the rain, the entire village spoke of nothing but Ebony. They called her the girl of the green field, the rain's daughter, even the earth's chosen one. Her name was whispered in the same breath as prayer. Wherever she walked, people greeted her with lowered heads and shy offerings, bowls of fruit, carved charms and woven bracelets. But not everyone bowed in gratitude. Inside a shaded hut at the far end of the village, her stepmother sat alone, eyes red from sleeplessness, fingers clenching her shawl so tightly that the threads began to fray. She was supposed to die, she muttered to herself, pacing. Left in the sun, forgotten like a weed. But now she returns with the sky behind her. Her daughters sat nearby, exchanging worried glances. The elder of the two, Kemi, bit her lip. Mother, maybe it's true, maybe the gods favor her. The crops. Silence, the stepmother snapped, slapping the wooden table. The gods do not favor the weak. She must have done something. Something unholy. The younger girl, Asha, frowned. But the food she brought fed everyone. Even us. That only enraged her more. Because she wants to shame me, she hissed. She wants to turn the people against me. Can't you see? She's not their savior, she's their curse wearing a sweet face. Kemi looked down. Then what will you do? The stepmother stopped pacing. Her eyes gleamed like a blade catching firelight. I will find the truth behind her trick. And when I do, the same people who bow to her now will drag her back to the field and bury her in the dirt she claims to bless. That afternoon, the stepmother began her quiet war. She spread whispers like seeds. Did you see how she walks and the plants move? She murmured to one woman at the well. The witches in the north do the same. They charm the ground. To an old man mending his net, she said, the rain came the night she slept in the fields, perhaps she spoke to something in the storm. And by evening, her voice had found dozens of ears, carrying like smoke through every house. The next morning the gossip sprouted. She doesn't eat like us. She walks under the sun yet never sweats. When she prays, the wind answers. Even those who had once bowed began to look at Ebony with uneasy eyes. Gratitude turned brittle, like clay drying in the heat. Ebony, unaware of the brewing venom, continued her quiet work. She shared food with the poor, comforted mothers whose children cried from hunger, and taught others how to care for the soil again. The crops responded to her presence, flourishing wherever she walked. But soon she began to notice the distance, the way people's voices softened when she passed, the way their eyes avoided hers. And then one afternoon, a group of elders arrived at her hut. They carried wooden staffs carved with ancestral symbols, and their faces were heavy with conflict. "Daughter," said the eldest among them, "there are rumors. People fear that your gift comes from dark places." Ebony's eyes widened. "Dark places? I asked for life. I gave thanks. How can gratitude be evil?" The man sighed. "Fear does not reason, child. It only feeds itself." Before she could reply, her stepmother appeared behind them, wearing the face of sorrow she had practiced in the mirror all morning. "I am only a mother worried for her child," she said sweetly, her voice trembling just enough to seem fragile. "If what she does is holy, let it be proven. If it is not, let the ancestors decide." Ebony looked at her stepmother, really looked. For the first time she saw not the harsh lines of age or anger, but a deep emptiness, a hunger far greater than her own had ever been. "Then let the earth judge me," Ebony said softly. "For the earth has already seen my heart." The elders nodded. "It will be done. Tomorrow at dawn you will stand in the field. The ancestors will answer through the soil." The stepmother bowed her head in false humility, but her lips curved into the faintest smile. That night, Ebony sat outside her hut under the quiet sky. The stars shimmered faintly as though whispering in code. "Why must kindness be tested?" she asked the darkness. And from the rustling leaves came a soft reply, not in words but in warmth. A small breeze brushed her cheek, carrying the scent of the field. The earth was still with her. But somewhere beyond the horizon, thunder rolled again, low, distant, and warning. Tomorrow it would not be the field bowing to her. It would be the village itself, kneeling before truth, whether in awe or in fear. Dawn broke red and heavy as if the sun itself hesitated to rise. A mist clung to the ground, carrying the chill of something waiting to be revealed. The villagers gathered in the field that had once been dead but now shimmered with dew and green. It was the same place where Ebony had fallen in hunger, and where life had first returned. Now it would become a courtroom. At the center stood Ebony, barefoot, her simple dress still damp from the morning air. Around her, the elders formed a wide circle, their staffs pressed into the earth. Beyond them, villagers whispered among themselves, hundreds of eyes watching, hundreds of hearts unsure. The stepmother arrived last. She wore white, the color of mourning, though there was no funeral, not yet. Her daughters trailed behind, silent and fearful. When the murmuring stopped, Elder Nuru stepped forward. His beard was white as salt, his eyes the color of storm clouds. "Child," he said solemnly, "you are accused of calling unnatural life from the soil. Some call it blessing, others call it witchcraft. Today the earth will decide." Ebony nodded. "Let the earth speak." The elder turned to the crowd. "If her heart is pure, the ground beneath her feet will remain whole. If it is not," he struck his staff into the dirt and the sound echoed like a drum, "the earth will reject her." A hush fell over the field. Ebony stepped forward. She could feel every blade of grass beneath her toes, every pulse within the ground. It wasn't anger she felt from it, it was attention. The land was listening. Elder Nuru raised his hands. "Speak now. Tell us how you brought this field to life." Ebony lifted her gaze. "I did not command the earth," she said quietly. "I begged it. I was starving. I asked for mercy and the sky wept for me. I thanked what others cursed." Her stepmother scoffed. "Pretty words," she said, stepping into the circle. "But storms do not come from mercy. They come from power. Tell them, girl, what did you promise the spirits in exchange for their favor?" Ebony looked at her, sorrow softening her face. "I promised nothing. I only listened." "Lies?" the stepmother hissed. "If she's not a witch, let the soil prove it." She grabbed a handful of the green stalks at her feet and yanked them up. The roots came free easily and she threw them down with a sneer. "See? Even this earth fears me not." But the moment the plants hit the ground, the field reacted. The wind dropped into silence. The birds stopped singing. Then a deep rumble echoed beneath them, slow, rolling, ancient. The earth trembled and everyone gasped. The stalks the stepmother had torn began to move. Their roots twitched, reaching, searching. Then, before all eyes, they reburied themselves in the soil. Within seconds they stood upright again, taller than before. The crowd screamed and stumbled back. Ebony did not move. Her face was serene as though she had expected this. "The earth remembers what hands harm it," she said softly. The stepmother's face twisted. "You think that trick frightens me?" she spat. "I'll show you who the earth truly fears." She lunged toward Ebony, her hand raised, but the ground cracked beneath her foot. A loud snap echoed and she stumbled, barely catching herself. Her eyes widened. The soil at her feet was moving. It rippled like water, pulling her down inch by inch. The more she struggled, the deeper she sank. The villagers cried out. "Help me!" she shrieked, clawing at the air. "Elder Nuru, help me!" The old man tried to step forward, but the ground near her churned violently, flinging dirt like waves. Ebony closed her eyes, her voice trembling with compassion. "Let her go," she whispered, and immediately the earth stilled. The stepmother collapsed, gasping, her white dress now brown with mud. Her face was pale as bone. No one spoke. Only the whisper of the wind passed between the rows of green. Elder Nuru stepped forward, his voice low. The earth has spoken. He turned to the crowd. No which would call mercy for her enemy. The villagers fell to their knees, murmuring prayers. Some cried. Others touched the soil reverently. The stepmother stared up at Ebony, shaking. What are you? Ebony knelt beside her. Just a daughter the world tried to starve, she said. But the world fed me instead. Then she rose, her figure framed by the golden light of the new sun. Behind her, the field bowed once more, the crops bending as if in gratitude. And from that moment on, no one ever doubted where her power came from. It was not witchcraft. It was justice, the kind only the earth could give. The miracle spread faster than rain. Within days, word reached every corner of the valley. The dead field lives again. A place where nothing grew now rippled with green life. Even the poorest soil nearby began to shimmer with strange fertility whenever Ebony passed through. But where miracles walk, envy soon follows. The first to come were traders, men with dusty feet and eyes that gleamed like coins. They stood at the edge of the field, staring at the golden grain and fat yams that had grown in a single week. This is not a field, one murmured. It's a treasure chest. That night, when the moon was low, they crept through the village with sacks and blades. Ebony woke to the sound of footsteps rustling among the crops. She stepped outside, barefoot, her breath clouding in the cold. The moonlight silvered the field, and there, in the midst of her blessings, shadows moved. She didn't shout. She didn't run. Instead, she whispered, "They are not yours." The men laughed softly. "The ground belongs to no one of them sneered. "And the crops belong to whoever can carry them." He slashed at the stalks, but his blade stopped mid-air. The grass coiled around it, green tendrils twining like ropes. The man screamed as the vines wrapped his wrist, pulling him down. The others tried to flee, but the ground shifted under their feet, softening into mud. They sank knee-deep, struggling as the soil clutched at their legs. The entire field began to move, slow, deliberate, alive. The crops bent, forming waves that rose and fell as if breathing. Ebony stepped closer, the moonlight gleaming in her eyes. "You take what feeds the hungry," she said quietly, "and so the earth will make you feel hunger too." At her words, the vines loosened, but the men fell to their knees, trembling. Their sacks lay empty beside them. The grain they'd stolen had turned to dust. By dawn, they had fled the village, their eyes wide with fear. But greed doesn't end with one warning. Soon, neighboring villages came, some out of curiosity, others out of desperation. Their harvest had failed that year, and they wanted what Ebony had. They brought baskets, prayers, and silver bracelets to trade. Ebony met them kindly. "You may eat," she told them, "but do not take what you do not understand." They nodded, smiling, but when night fell they began to uproot the crops and carry them home. The next morning they found that the stolen plants had withered overnight. Their soil had turned black and bitter. Panic spread like fire. "She cursed us," they cried. "Her power is not a gift, it's witchcraft." Anger followed fear, and one evening, a crowd gathered at her gate. Torches flickered in their hands. "Share your secret or burn with your field," they shouted. Ebony stood in the doorway, the glow of the flames reflected in her eyes. For a moment she looked like any other woman, small, weary, alone. But then a soft wind stirred, carrying her voice across the mob. "I cannot give what is not mine," she said. "This field grows from mercy, not greed." Someone threw a torch into the crops. The fire caught, but instead of spreading it sank. The flames hissed, curling backward, and the stalks turned to water. A mist rose from the ground, cool and glowing, swallowing the fire whole. The villagers froze. Ebony stepped forward. "You came with hunger," she said. "But not the hunger of the body, the hunger that devours the soul." The mist swirled, rising higher until it reached the sky. When it cleared, the torches were extinguished and every man and woman stood with empty hands. No one dared speak. Finally, Elder Nuru stepped from the shadows, leaning on his staff. "This girl has given what the land chose to give," he said. "And the land has chosen to protect her. If you take again, it will not be crops that bow, but you." The crowd fell silent. Slowly they turned and left, their footsteps fading into the night. Ebony remained standing until the last torch disappeared. Then she knelt and pressed her palms to the earth. "Thank you," she whispered. The soil beneath her pulsed once, warm and gentle, like a heartbeat. And though no one saw it, the field shimmered faintly, a soft green glow spreading outward, protecting its keeper. After the night of the fire, the world grew quieter around Ebony. The villagers no longer shouted at her door, nor did greedy traders wander near her fields. Yet the silence was uneasy, heavy with the kind of respect born from fear. Mothers whispered her name in their prayers, but children were told not to look her in the eyes when she passed. Ebony didn't blame them. She didn't speak much anymore. Each morning she walked barefoot through the soil, touching the tips of the leaves, listening to the slow hum that lived beneath the ground. The crops still bent toward her, maize bowing, beans unfurling their vines at her feet. But she felt something different in the air now. The earth was restless, and the wind carried the scent of something approaching. Then one evening the horizon darkened. Not the gray of storms but a deeper shade, like a bruise spreading across the sky. The animals grew restless, goats bleated and birds circled low. Ebony looked up. The clouds churned, thick and low, as if the heavens were gathering breath. She whispered, "Rain is coming." But the villagers didn't believe her. "It hasn't rained in months," one said. "The gods have turned away." Ebony only smiled faintly. "Then perhaps they are turning back." That night, thunder rolled like 1,000 drums. Lightning forked across the sky, slicing it open. The first drops fell heavy and slow, like tears from something vast and grieving. Ebony stepped outside, arms open, the rain soaking her dress, washing the dust from her hair. For the first time since her suffering began, she felt seen, not by people but by the sky itself. The field came alive. Each drop struck the leaves like a note in a grand song. The plants swayed in rhythm and the soil sighed as it drank deeply. Streams formed between the rows, silver in the lightning's glow. The villagers woke to the sound, and stumbled from their huts, faces lifted in awe. "It's rain," someone cried. "Real rain." The children ran barefoot through the puddles, laughing. The elders wept. Even the men who had once threatened Ebony now fell to their knees, whispering apologies to the storm. And at the center of it all stood Ebony, her eyes closed, her palms lifted. The rain did not strike her face, it curved gently around her, falling in arcs that shimmered with light. Elder Nuru approached slowly, his cloak drenched. "You have called the heavens," he said, his voice trembling. "Tell me, child, what are you?" Ebony opened her eyes. They were not the same brown as before, now they glowed faintly like wet earth after lightning. "I am what the earth remembers," she said softly, "and what the sky forgives." The elder bowed his head. "Then may we learn to remember and forgive as well." By morning the storm had passed, leaving the world washed and reborn. The fields stretched wide and endless, green as emeralds. Flowers that had been unseen for years bloomed again. Lilies, marula blossoms, wild grass that shimmered like silk. The villagers gathered, offering food and gifts at Ebony's doorstep. But she shook her head gently. "Keep them," she said. "Feed your children. The field no longer belongs to me. It belongs to all who do not take more than they need." The people listened, and for once they understood. They began to work together again, tilling, planting, sharing water. The bitterness that had once ruled the village softened into gratitude. And when they spoke of her, they did not call her witch or outcast anymore. They called her the rain's daughter. And though Ebony smiled when she heard it, a part of her knew, the rain's gift was not the end of her story. Something deeper still slept beneath the soil, waiting for her to wake it. In the weeks after the rain, Ebony's field grew faster than any had ever seen. Grain bent heavy under the weight of its own gold, vines climbed the trees like children reaching for a mother's hand, and the earth pulsed softly, a heartbeat beneath her feet. But with each sunrise the whispers grew louder. At first she thought it was wind through the leaves. But one morning when she knelt to gather fallen pots, the sound formed words. "Ebony." The name rippled through the soil, faint yet certain. She froze, her hands trembling over the roots. "Ebony, child of the buried, we remember you." She stepped back, heart pounding. "Who speaks?" Silence. Then a rustle, not of wind but of something deep and old, shifting beneath the crops. The soil moved like breath. That night she couldn't sleep. The whispers returned, clearer now, calling her to the field. Barefoot she stepped into the moonlight. The ground glowed faintly, silver veins pulsing beneath the rows. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth. She knelt. "If you are spirit, speak truly." A sound like roots tearing filled the air, not painful but powerful. From the soil rose something ancient, the faint shape of a woman made from vines and clay, her eyes two glowing seeds. "Do you not know us?" the figure asked. Ebony's lips parted. No, but I feel you. The being smiled sadly. You feel us because you are of us. The blood in your veins once fed the fields. Your mother's mother, she spoke to rain and root before men forgot her name. But your stepfather buried her stories, just as he tried to bury you. Ebony's breath caught. Then, this power is not curse? No, said the spirit. It is memory. The land remembers kindness and cruelty. When you were left hungry, the roots fed you because you never took what was not given. That is the old law, the covenant of balance. Ebony lowered her gaze. Then why do they fear me? Because they fear what they cannot command. The earth cannot be owned and neither can you. The spirit's voice softened. But child, there is a wound still bleeding in this soil. The ones who hurt you took not only food but truth. Buried beneath your field lies more than roots. There lies the seed of every lie ever told to silence a woman. Ebony looked down and the earth shimmered, showing her flashes. Women of old, punished for speaking, for healing, for knowing too much. She whispered, "What must I do?" "Listen," said the spirit, fading into mist. "The earth will show you where the pain sleeps. Dig, not for grain but for truth." The next dawn, Ebony carried no tools, only her hands. She began to dig near the center of her field. The soil was soft, warm as breath. As she dug deeper, she felt it, a smooth object buried in the dark. When she pulled it free, moonlight glinted across its surface. A bracelet of roots woven with silver, pulsing faintly like a living thing. The whispers rose again, echoing through her bones. The earth gives, but it also remembers. Feed what is hungry. Free what was buried. And as she held the bracelet close, the wind stirred through the field, carrying a strange scent, not of rain or soil but of something older, something waking. The sky broke open that night, not in anger but in recognition. Rain poured down like memory returning to the world, silver threads stitching the air. Ebony stood in her field, soaked and barefoot, clutching the woven bracelet of roots and silver. It pulsed softly as if it held a heartbeat of its own. Each throb seemed to echo within her chest, binding her to the land around her. The crops bowed low, shimmering under the storm, their leaves whispering like 1,000 hushed prayers. She raised her hand, and the rain changed direction, spiraling gently around her instead of falling upon her head. The drops curved in midair like a curtain of glass. Ebony's breath caught. "It listens," she whispered. And then the voice came, not from the bracelet nor the earth but from the rain itself. "Ebony, child of the hungry. You have been given what was once taken. Speak and the world will answer." The wind stirred her braids and a low rumble of thunder rolled across the plains. "Then hear me," she said, voice trembling but strong. "Those who left me here, who fed me to the sun's cruelty, shall face what they planted." The bracelet glowed brighter, veins of light running up her arm like living roots. The storm gathered above her, dark and electric, and somewhere in the distance the village began to stir. By dawn the villagers were awake. Mama Duro stood outside her hut, clutching her shawl as rain drenched the yard. Her daughters huddled close, shivering, afraid to look toward the fields. "Mother," the eldest whispered, "it hasn't stopped raining since she came back." "Silence," Mama Duro hissed. "The rain will wash her away again." "It must." But even as she spoke, a shape appeared through the mist, a figure walking slowly through the flooded path, water parting around her ankles. Ebony. Her skin glowed faintly under the morning gray, her eyes reflecting the color of the sky, deep, endless, alive. The roots of the field trailed behind her like living threads. "Child," Mama Duro's voice faltered. You should not be here." Ebony stopped in the center of the yard. "You told me not to return until the earth fed me. It has." The stepmother took a step back. "You mock me." "I do not need to," Ebony said quietly. "The earth remembers." Her voice rippled through the air like thunder over water. The villagers gathered, drawn by the sound, men, women, and children watching from the edges of their huts. The rain had grown heavy again, but wherever Ebony stood, not a drop touched her. Mama Duro trembled. "What do you want?" Ebony looked at her, really looked, and saw a woman eaten by her own bitterness, hollowed by fear of hunger, of loss, of a world that never gave enough. "I want nothing from you," Ebony said. "But the land does. You sowed cruelty. You will reap what you planted." The earth beneath Mama Duro's feet began to stir. Mud rippled like breathing skin. Roots slithered upward, wrapping gently, not to kill but to bind. She screamed, trying to pull away, but the vines only tightened. Her daughters cried out, but when they ran to help, the roots tangled their ankles too. "Please?" Mama Duro gasped. Spare us. I was only afraid. Ebony raised a hand and the vines paused. Fear is no excuse for hunger born of greed. The rain shifted tone, no longer chaotic but rhythmic, almost musical. The villagers fell silent as the sound formed words, low and deep, echoing Ebony's own. The earth gives to those who give. The earth starves those who starve others. Ebony looked toward the crowd, her eyes calm. I am no spirit, she said softly. I am your reminder. Feed your children. Feed your land. Feed your hearts, or the rain will never end. As she lowered her hand, the vines loosened and fell away. Mama Duro and her daughters collapsed into the mud, sobbing. The villagers stared at Ebony, unsure whether to bow or flee. She turned and walked away from the yard, the rain parting once more. Each step she took left green sprouts pushing through the soil, tiny new shoots where there had been only mud. Behind her, the village began to change. People knelt, scooping the soft, living earth in their hands. Some whispered prayers. Others wept, washing their faces in the rain. The storm above her eased to a soft drizzle. Ebony stopped at the edge of the field, raising her hand once more to the sky. Let this rain feed, not punish, she murmured. Let it remember mercy. And the sky, for the first time in many moons, obeyed. The clouds thinned, sunlight touched the horizon, and the field glistened gold once more, not with hunger but with rebirth. The storm had ended, but its memory lingered in the air. The village smelled of new earth, wet, green, alive. Smoke rose from hearths where fires were lit again for the first time in weeks, and laughter echoed faintly, cautious as a first breath after weeping. Ebony stood at the edge of her field, watching as the villagers gathered to harvest the new grain. Her field, the one they had cursed and called barren, now overflowed. Every stalk bent heavy with gold, the soil soft as warm bread beneath bare feet. Children ran between the rows, chasing one another, their hands full of maize. Old women knelt to touch the ground, murmuring blessings. Men who once averted their eyes from her now bowed their heads in silence. But Ebony felt no pride, only a quiet ache, deep and still. Mama Duro approached slowly, her shawl clinging damply to her shoulders. Her steps were hesitant, as though the ground itself might still judge her. Behind her walked her daughters, their faces pale with shame. When she reached Ebony, she fell to her knees. Child, she whispered, voice hoarse. I do not ask forgiveness, I do not deserve it. But I beg for mercy. Not for me but for them. She nodded toward her daughters, who stared at the ground. They are still young. Do not let them carry my sins. Ebony looked down at the woman who had once starved her. She could still see the cruelty in her face, but beneath it, a new softness trembled. Fear had given way to regret. Ebony knelt beside her, the bracelet on her wrist glowing faintly. I am not the one who grants mercy, she said softly. The earth does. But I will not curse you. Let the rain wash us all clean. Mama Duro's tears fell into the soil. For the first time she touched Ebony's hand, not in anger, not in power, but in surrender. The days that followed became legend. Under Ebony's guidance, the villagers worked together to restore every field. She taught them how to listen to the soil, to offer thanks before harvest, to leave part of the crop for the birds and the forgotten spirits. Each season the land repaid them in kind. But word of her gift spread beyond the borders of the village. Strangers came, traders, chiefs, even warriors, seeking the girl who could command the rain. They offered riches, jewels, kingdoms. Some demanded her power, others begged for it. Yet Ebony refused them all. The earth is not a slave, she said. It listens only to those who love it. Still, the visits grew more frequent, and with them came trouble, greed disguised as gratitude, envy dressed as faith. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Ebony stood alone in her field once more. The crops glowed like fire beneath the fading light. The bracelet on her wrist pulsed, slow, steady, alive. She closed her eyes and listened. The earth beneath her feet hummed gently, like a mother's lullaby. It is time, the whisper said. You have fed them. Now go where hunger still cries. Her eyes opened, calm, knowing. At dawn, the villagers woke to find her hut empty. Only the bracelet remained, laid upon her mat, its glow dimming softly as if it had gone to sleep. Outside, the fields shimmered with dew, the air heavy with the promise of rain. And on the horizon, far beyond the hills, some swore they saw her figure walking, bare feet touching the ground with reverence, a faint halo of light trailing behind her like dawn itself. Wherever she stepped, the land turned green. Seasons passed, and time softened Ebony's story into something that lived between truth and prayer. Children who had once watched her walk through the rain grew old and gray, and their grandchildren learned to speak her name like a blessing. No one remembered exactly when she vanished. Some said she walked east toward the mountains, others swore she followed the river until it reached the sea. But all agreed on one thing: wherever she went, life followed. When drought threatened a neighboring land, people claimed to see her reflection in the first drops of returning rain. When fields sprouted overnight after years of failure, elders whispered, "Ebony has passed this way." The village she left behind prospered. The crops grew faithfully, the rivers ran clear, and the wind carried a gentle hum whenever the harvest neared. They called it the Song of the Fields. At dusk, when the world was painted gold and the air smelled of maize and clay, you could hear it, a low vibration that rose from the soil, a hum that moved like heartbeat and memory combined. It was said that if you listened closely, you would hear words woven within it. Feed what is hungry. Love what grows. Mama Duro grew old in the same hut where she had once sent Ebony away. Her hands became frail, her sight dim, but she never left the village. Every morning she would carry a small bowl of grain to the field and scatter it across the earth. "Eat well, child," she would whisper, voice trembling. "Forgive the hand that starved you." Her daughters, grown into mothers themselves, taught their own children the story of Ebony, not as a tale of punishment but of grace. When you plant, they told them, sing to the seeds. When you harvest, give thanks. And never let a soul go hungry in your sight. The old became wise, the young became kind, and though no one could see Ebony anymore, her spirit lived in every blade of green that pushed through the soil. Generations later, travelers from distant lands arrived. They came upon the same field, still fertile, still glowing in the heat of the afternoon sun. The villagers welcomed them and offered bowls of roasted grain and milk, just as Ebony once dreamed of having. When the travelers asked about the strange humming sound that filled the air, the chief smiled and said, "That is the land singing. It remembers the one who listened when no one else did." And that night, under a moon silver and full, the villagers gathered to retell the story, how a hungry girl was left to die among dead crops, and how the earth, remembering kindness, refused to let her starve. They told of the rain that came without prayer, of the roots that carried her heartbeat, of the day she turned hunger into harvest. And as they spoke, the wind rose softly as though someone unseen had joined their song. Children leaned close to the fire, wide-eyed. "Grandmother," one whispered, "is she still out there?" The old woman smiled, gazing toward the fields shimmering beneath the starlight. "Yes," she said, "she walks wherever the soil cries for mercy. When the earth thirsts, she is rain. When the seeds tremble in the dark, she is warmth. When you share food with a stranger, she smiles." The flames flickered higher, and for a moment, some swore they saw her silhouette dancing in the glow, a girl made of light and rain, her braids twined with silver roots, her hands open to the world. Long after the fire died, the hum of the earth remained, that soft, endless rhythm that tied sky to soil, hunger to mercy, and the forgotten to the remembered. And in the quiet between breaths, when wind passed through the fields like fingers through hair, a faint voice could still be heard, tender, eternal, and full of love. "Feed what is hungry. Love what grows. The earth remembers,